3d6 down the line.
Okay, another session in the books, guys.
Oof. In the
Amazing.
books, literally in the books.
Literally, yeah.
I meant that.
Well said. Well said.
Oh my god.
Yep.
I am just I'm pretty blown away by the depth of the prep for this.
It's wild.
It's pretty insane, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you guys were probably picking up on the fact that I had full details of like what the books looked like, how they were bound, who wrote them, you know, and there was even some information that I didn't convey because it was just a little too detailed. Like I have
iambic pentameter.
Yeah, exactly.
The font names and sizes.
Yeah, there you go. They're all Helvetica, but you know,
Time
it's the first
to our
use of
Kantian.
Helvetica.
So there's a whole appendices that's just called Arden Vul books. So he has each thing coded, like who the author is, the language it's in, the type of book, like the form, like is it a codex, is it a quire, the dimensions, the weight, the rarity, the field of study, the special knowledge categories it involves, all that sort of stuff, and then of course the actual description of it. And it goes. Let's see, it's on. It's on volume 4 of Arden Vul, page 141, and it goes 141 to. I'm still going. Here we go. 141 to 169.
Wow.
So that's over 20 pages of works of literature, fully detailed.
So, I've never seen the books, obviously, right? But I'm curious about one thing, just because of like the structure of the module, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does each one of these books that maybe has a tie-in to somewhere else, is that like in there as well? Like, oh, this book, does he spell out this book relates to this area, this level of the dungeon, this kind of mystery thing?
No. Well, no, not in the descriptions of the books themselves. However, in the key descriptions of the dungeon where some of these books are found, there will be relevant info if it pertains, basically. So yes, basically, like it does. The other thing that he does, which is really nice, just for reference, is that all of the books in the appendix have the locations where all of them are found. So like you can move in between, you know. This is a common question, actually. That's a good time to actually bring this up for viewers. We've gotten a lot of comments asking, like, how do you, John, navigate such a huge, massive tome on the fly? You know, what a huge part of it is that I ask these guys to give me a firm plan so I can prep relevant areas. That's the biggest part. Yeah,
we try. I was gonna say,
yeah.
And then there's Ted.
Yeah, you know, we could just.
What if we just took the other path?
Speaking of which, Ted,
I've been you guys up for weeks, but that's all right.
The diversion that you were actually recommending, Ted, or suggesting, was actually the place that I got caught out in the open all those weeks ago. Was whenever you went down there, and I was not prepped for it, and I just had to tell you, like, I'm not prepped for it, guys. Like, we can't do it. You know what I mean? That will often be the case, but we learned our lesson, and now with this formula that we have now, where these guys. But anyways, my point being that one of the ways that I'm able to navigate is that I am using Adobe Acrobat. And not just Reader, but Acrobat, the actual program, to read the module. And what Acrobat allows you to do is to hyperlink. And so maybe Reader does allow you to do that. I'm not sure. But anyways, point being, what I do is when I'm doing my prepping, I hyperlink the fuck out of everything. So anything that references like, oh, this can be found here, I hyperlink it so that I can immediately just press the button. So what I was doing with the works from the Library of Thoth is, like, I had the list in the key description of the Library of Thoth of what the works were. During my prep earlier, I hyperlinked all of them so that it would immediately jump to the appendices to where the bigger descriptions were. And, you know, I could just go back and forth really, really quick. So no page flipping, no scrolling, no having to look through bookmarks. It's just literally like a link, you know. But I had to do that. I did have to do that prep to link it. But doing that prep earlier just makes it so much easier in the time of the session to move through things very, very quickly. So,
yeah. I mean, it's a good peek under the hood at the hard work you're doing to just keep things flowing too.
Yeah.
When I was in college, my roommate had a Mac, and it had I think the program was called HyperCard. This predates the internet, or the internet as we know it anyway. I mean, I think it existed at that point, but, you know, there were no browsers yet. But they had this program called HyperCard that you basically he would use it to create dungeons. You know, he would write an encounter on a card and then hyperlink it to other cards, and that was how he ran adventures. Was just this program on his, you know, as you remember the Macs, they were like a box.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it was like a little toaster. Yeah,
the toaster. It was. I mean, this was 1990,
Still.
1989. It was great.
That
was so cool.
The core of that tech, though, is basically what all of these like Notion and Notion and Obsidian, all these like advanced like note-taking apps that everyone's always pimping out for use for D&D, basically have at their core. It's like where it's like a mind map sort of thing, where everything is sort of like backlinked and hyperlinked, and everything sort of like webs out and everything. It's pretty. I haven't dived into that sort of stuff. The closest I came to that was using Evernote like way back in the day. But I did that actually. You know what I used Evernote for was our Eberron campaign way back in the day. Heavy use of Evernote, and it was at the time Evernote was like cutting edge, and it was very, very useful because you could just branch out to all sorts of different notes and pictures and images. And, I know like Microsoft OneNote is that their Office suite thing that has a similar thing. But for me, it's
ran. Good.
I was just saying like Google Docs that's what I use. It's super simple. It's not the most sleek thing, but it works. Yeah.
It's accessible. I was just gonna springboard off what you said and mention that John ran a magnificent 2 or 3 long Eberron campaign for us. I mean, it was quite long.
It was
longest
like 3
I've
years,
ever experienced.
Yeah.
Also, the first campaign I ever played, so I really jumped into the deep end from the start. It was phenomenal.
It was a good one.
Yeah. John's been at this for a while. He's no small amount of ambition from John.
We've been doing it for a while. Then. Yeah.
Sadly, I was just a twinkle in John's eye at that point.
That's so true. That's right. You had yet to be born. But
Faja.
That's something we could always discuss too, like on the prophetic Discord server sometime in the future. Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts on like that campaign holds a very, very special place in my heart. But now that I've sort of had my OSR epiphany, there are things that I just make me cringe when I think back at how I ran that campaign that I'm very ashamed of. But I mean, there's
well, you shouldn't be. Yeah.
Well, it's just
there's nothing to be ashamed of. That was an awesome campaign.
Yeah. I mean, I know that you guys had a great time. So so in the end, that's all that really matters. But looking back on it, I would never run that campaign the way that I did with my.
Well, as an outsider looking in, and I don't know what you're alluding to, it was phenomenal for us. What I would say is I just pity you the amount of work it required, right? Like, it was truly an opus of an experience, which we benefited from, right? Like, it really was phenomenal. But man, it is hard work to build something of that scale, especially like that's in like a system that's more sort of like plot driven and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. We used Pathfinder for that game. Yeah.
I think to be fair to yourself, John, I mean, we've had kind of an OSR epiphany in that, there's a style of play and an approach to game mechanics and the point of being an adventure, et cetera, that is different from the way we were playing that Pathfinder game. But I think it's fair to say that the approach we took to that Pathfinder game was instrumental to its success. We would not have had as good a Pathfinder. That campaign was part and parcel with its system and its setting.
100% agree. Yeah.
And it 100% worked. So and maybe we've moved on from that and we don't want to play that kind of game anymore, but I don't think you should feel at all like you would, I would never do that again. Oh no,
it wasn't the system. Like I had no problem with Pathfinder at the time. And I appreciate Pathfinder for what it does for that kind of style of game. But it was more that it was much more about my self-aggrandizement about being able to tell an awesome story and railroad you along it. And that's what what I'm kind of afraid of. Like there was that campaign did not have a lot of player agency. I had a thing in mind for that campaign, and God damn it, you were going to follow. You were going to experience it, and it was going to be awesome. And you thought it was awesome, so I did a good job telling us.
Awesome.
But
you gave us enough agency. I mean, we had some things happen. I mean, David's character, the vampire, running off to, do his
I forgot the first character I willfully sacrificed. I forgot that.
The way we took that whole prison camp thing and turned it into like, my Warforged becoming a god amongst hobgoblins. I mean, we had plenty of agency, John. Don't worry.
It was a lot of fun. There was a lot of fun for sure. For sure.
That was it was very fun. I mean, I'm sure that everyone watching is like, okay, whatever.
Tell me about your character, man. Was he really cool?
That's the way Matt's like it too. He's like, whatever.
Oh wait, are you guys done?
Sorry about that.
But no, my point being though that I think that agency, it's a scale, right?
Yeah.
Like you can be completely sandboxed, you can be completely railroaded, and we were not at either end of that for that game. So.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, it was very, very fun. Yeah. So anyways, back to Arden Vul. It's very impressive. Not that I ever look forward to the end of this, but when we do call it quits at some point, it's going to be fun for you guys to actually be able to look at the product. I'm looking forward to having you guys actually look at it. Just
all the stuff we missed. Oh, it's going to be so painful.
Yeah, you're going to marvel at. I almost feel bad for you guys because of course you guys are not allowed to look at it. Everyone out there is allowed to look at it if they want to purchase it or whatever. But it's going to be cool when you guys actually open those books and take a look at that. Just it's just mind boggling. And the more we get into it, the more I'm like, my God, this is it's like a staggering work of genius. It really is. Like, I don't want to kiss Richard's ass too much, but I get the impression that it doesn't get a lot of press because of how expensive it is, but the price is completely justified for the amount of material. So don't hesitate if you're even thinking about it. But that most of the reviews I've read, it's just so daunting of a work that you can't really critically review it. It's just too hard. Like it's too much to kind of take in to actually be able to come up with a good critical review of it, I feel. And so the reviews that I've read are appreciative of its scope, but they tend to be a little bit dismissive. Like it's like the way that it's written, it's like it's hard to parse and you can't really reference things. Like it's just sort of like looking at it cursorily and going like, this can't be DM'd in any sort of reasonable manner. And I'm hoping that we are showing you guys that it certainly can. I appreciate all the kind comments about my GMing skills and all that kind of stuff, but this is stuff that anyone can do. It is not something that is like for the higher echelons of super skilled players. It's like if this sounds appealing, buy it and run it for your group because you will have, I can guarantee you will have a completely different experience than what we're having because of how well written and designed the module is. I'm looking forward to the day not looking forward to wrapping it up, like I said, but at that point where I'm going to be, I feel like one of the very few people out there that can actually write an actual review of what this thing actually is. And it should be more recognized than it actually is in the like I see like threads on Reddit where it's like, what's the greatest mega dungeon? Recommend to me a mega dungeon. And Arden Vul like very rarely gets brought up. It's always Stonehell and Rappan Athik and Caverns of Thracia and things like that, which are all awesome and stuff like that. But those are manageable, right? Those seem like you can wrap your head around it. And Arden Vul isn't one of those. But in my mind, it should be the number one. Like the number one mega dungeon. Like this is, for all that talk of like how to make a good mega dungeon, this is one that actually achieves that. Unlike ones I feel like Undermountain, for instance, which is lauded across so many blogs about like it just has so much lore, and Ed Greenwood is a genius and blah blah blah. I love Ed Greenwood, I love the realms, but like if you look at Undermountain, man, there's a lot of empty corridors, man.
Yeah, there is.
So it's vast and sprawling, but how much content is actually there? And there's always the excuse, well, we leave it empty because that allows the GMs to fill it. It's like, well, if you're leaving it for GMs to fill, I just might as well make my own mega dungeon. You know what I mean? It's like I'm buying your product so that you provide me with stuff, so I don't have to do that shit. Arden Vul delivers on that, and it delivers like 200%. So
what I'm curious about, like this has been out like since what, like 2019, 2020s, right?
Something like that. Yeah,
something like that. I'm curious, like, who has been playing it the longest? Like, this seems like the kind of thing you could play for, like, you mentioned Eberron was like, what, 2 or 3 years that you guys played? I could see this just going on for years and years, because it's so huge, all these different factions to play against, all these different places and levels. I mean, we've just scratched the surface doing nothing. I'm dying to hear, like, who's been playing this the longest, who's still doing it. If anybody out there knows, definitely like contact us and let us know, because I'm fascinated by how big this is and how much time people can, like, we're having a really great time. I mean, hopefully you guys can see that. It's really, really fun. And, the biggest challenges we've had as a group is picking which awesome thing to go do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Truly, the most common debate, or you could say argument, but in the good spirited way, it's like, what cool shit do we want to do this week? Well, that's hard to decide when there's a lot of good shit to do.
No wrong answers, right? Everything is fun everywhere.
So it's a unique challenge. I haven't looked at the book, so I can't speak to it, but I'm curious, like, not only is a mega dungeon a great like resource for like the scope of play that we're talking about, but also worth mentioning that John has been really receptive to and intentional about using those resources in a living way, right? Not treating them as static. I don't know if Robert like encourages that in his writing. I've read the book, right? But like, it makes that space, which is already so rich, ever more dynamic, because the more we prod and poke and do things, see the burning head thing we just talked about, right? The more interesting it evolves, right? And the more complex and unexpected the outcomes become, because in an agency forward game like we're playing, our interests will necessarily be reappraised as that happens, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's absolutely. Yep.
Well, I have a question about that, actually, John, which is that does the Arden Vul set of volumes come with like a GM's tips, guides, how to run it kind of thing, or how to get started? Like,
sure.
How much of this is your planning and how much of this is like prep for you a little bit?
There was no planning on my part, and there are opening chapters which give you a lot of GM advice. And he makes it very, very clear. He actually has a chapter on his design intentions, which was very, very helpful. He speaks in the first person. He's like, "This is what I was trying to do." So that makes it that's like so key. Any authors out there, tell people in the printed work what your intentions are with design. That is such a huge boon for GMs, and he does that for Arden Vul. So he makes it very, very clear that it is a sandbox, that there is no overarching plot. And he also, in that same chapter, gives you a lot of adventure hooks. And I decided not to do that, because at the beginning of the campaign, I was like, this is going to be completely open. I want maximum player agency. Like Dolmenwood had a lot of player agency, but as anyone who's watched episode 1 of Dolmenwood at the Clashed Antler, I had a lot of NPCs with glowing exclamation points above their heads, right? And you just had to pick one, right? But I set those, right? They were all written by Gavin, but I set them all, right? And so you had a limited number that you could just snag, and then I just went with the flow, and then it was player agency from there. But this one, I was just like, I'm putting you in front of the falls, do whatever you want. You know what I mean? And that's been the case the entire time. There have been adventure hooks that have been since introduced, but they've been mostly as a reaction to your own actions, like things that you have uncovered or discovered. Then I sort of insert them as they open up. Right. So
are there and this is not a criticism on the author in any way. I assume there are errata. You've come across mistakes or blank spots or something, or is there a published errata?
There's no published errata, but this actually might be the first time I'm admitting this to you guys as well. There is a rather difficult to find Facebook group that is run by Richard Barton. Yes, and
to discover it, you need to find a tome within the library of Arden Vul.
Yeah, exactly.
In which there is a hyperlink in Mithric.
Yeah, it's actually quite open. Like if you search for Arden Vul on Facebook, you'll be able to find it. But I'm asking you guys to please don't try to.
going to.
Can't wait to go in the disguise.
Yeah. When I talk about,
I've just got a couple of questions.
Listen, hypothetically,
that does give me a somewhat direct line to Richard, who is always gracious enough to answer any questions that any members of those group have. And he has posted a number of errata, or if we ask him like I didn't find this thing, he's like he'll admit like, oh yeah, that just didn't make the cut, or I forgot about that. He's always happy to give details. For instance, like one thing that's actually been in effect is the I think it's the names of the days of the week, or it might be the months. One or the other was not detailed in the book.
You did mention that, yeah.
Yeah, and so I just asked it on the Facebook group, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that just didn't make it. Here's the." He's like, "Here you go," and I was like, "Sweet," So it's nice to have that resource.
I've noticed when you're working on big lore, big world kind of stuff, like you have a great idea, you write out a section for something, and then 6 months later you're working on something else, and you forget what you wrote. The first part, and you write up something completely new that totally contradicts it, and I just trying to put together something of this scope with problems like that it blows my mind.
Yeah, that's a point in case is like you can see why an editor is so key to any sort of project of this kind of scope, any kind of campaign setting building or a massive mega dungeon like this, and so I should give a shout out to Joseph Browning, who is the person who is basically Expeditious Retreat Press. He basically the guy, and has as much of a creative hand in the creation of Arden Vul as Richard did. I'm sure he was helpful in keeping all of that lore straight. So
makes sense.
Yeah.
Then you got to have an illustrator, and you got to have a map maker and layout. It's a big project.
Yeah.
Can you hold them up? Can we see them? The books?
Yeah, sure. I can grab them.
Got them right there. Show off your library, John.
Yeah. Here you go.
This is
oh my god, I love it so much.
Whoa. So I only bought 4 out of the 5 because the 5th volume is maps, and there's just no reason for me to have those other than PDF form. So I didn't buy the 5th volume, but these are the 4 volumes of actual content.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Right.
And they're massive, man. They're big. I just happen to have them, but I rarely use them just because it's so convenient to for our setup for 3D6 DTL. It's just easier for the to use the PDFs,
You don't sit around in a smoking jacket and a pipe in your armchair reading the Arden Vul.
Well, I read them. I read the physical books, but I basically, when I do my prep, I have to read the PDF because I have to be able to hyperlink as I go. So that's key to the prep. So, yep.
Right on.
All right, bedtime, I assume.
Yeah, I think it's
that's fun.